Hi, Lexi Daly here with this week's episode of Make It Monday for Paper Tray Ink. Today we will be making watercolor resist with rubber cement. So when I was thinking of something to share for this week's Make It Monday, I came across this image of Easter eggs dyed with rubber cement to resist the dye in several bright colors. And it reminded me of an activity I once did with rubber cement and watercolor resist. So same idea, just instead of on eggs, I wanted to do it on watercolor paper. This image could be traced back to Better Homes and Gardens and parenting.com, and basically you dye your egg, you add rubber cement, then you dye it in another color, and then you can add more rubber cement, dye it in another color, and then you rub all the rubber cement off and you see those original colors underneath the rubber cement. So I thought that I would use the same idea to create paper that I can use on my cards. So this is the one that we're going to make today, and I'll show you some other examples that I came up with in my exploring phase. So let's just get started on the process. So let me set this aside. And you need watercolor paper. And if you're going to die cut it, or I would start small. So something that is a little bit bigger than what you want to die cut, or the size of the layer that you want to use on your card or something like that. So I just have one that is die cuttable, and it was just, I did small size this way to experiment. You need rubber cement. I'm using a large paintbrush here just because I want to cover very quickly a lot of space. And then colors. And I recommend either colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, shades of similar colors. You don't want your colors to become muddy or brown. So you need to think about the colors that you're going to use, because there will be some mixing of color, and then the layering protects some of the color as well. So I started with these. I think that in some of my samples I used the orange, some I just did the pink twice. And then on the balloon specifically, I ended off with a shimmery touch because that pattern kind of reminded me of balloons. So let's just move these up and I'll pull them down as I need them. So for starters, I'm going to just wash over my card with the lightest color. And I'm going to go for yellow and just give a nice, and I don't want it to be too dark. Well, actually that's an experimental thing. You can go with, as long as it's your lightest color, you can have it as dark or rich as you want. For my balloon, I did not go as dark, and in some of my other samples you'll see where I did. And sometimes it's just playing around and you get what you get and you use it for something. That's the cool thing about this technique. Now there is a lot of drawing time in between all of the steps. So after the painting, you can dry it with your heat gun, but during the rubber cement phase, you just kind of have to let that dry. So let me dry this and we can move on to step 2. And it probably would have been helpful to wipe this up a little bit in between. That's going to be on the back. So let me just flatten out my card a little bit. And you could have it taped down if you like to work that way. I just guess I move it around and I kind of like it to go to the edges. So the next step is to take your rubber cement and drizzle it, or you can even paint it on, but I really like that kind of swirly drizzly effect. But you drizzle it on and just twirl it around and let it go. Have fun with it. I like big swooping gestures too sometimes, and sometimes it gets thin and I wait for it to drip a little bit more. And if you want it to start off thicker, you can have it do that. I'm working on a non-stick mat, so whatever comes off on my mat will wipe right off after it's dry. You could put a piece of paper under it and just throw that away. And now we just let it dry. I recommend closing the bottle up tightly in between layers, otherwise you're going to knock yourself out with the smell. And this is going to take a while, so I'll turn it off and I'll come back when it's dry. All right, so now this first application of rubber cement has dried. You can see where there had been puddles, they've kind of flattened out, and that's a good indication of when you can paint. I was moving some things around in the meantime, and I kind of dropped something here, so I'm not sure if that's going to be a hole or if it'll resist all the way, but either way it'll be pretty cool. But that was a puddle and something kind of fell on it. Anyway, so now it's time to just paint a second wash of color. So this time I'm going to do the pink, and I'm going to wet my paper first because I want it to be really light. So I'm just going to wet my paper and wet my stamp, wet my watercolor, and I want it really watery because I want a light touch of the pink the first time. And just kind of let the color wash around, and it's okay if it's a little darker in some areas than others. That's what really gives it interest. And I think when I was, looking at the balloon, I thought, oh, the top is actually more saturated than the bottom, which shows kind of light or stretching of the balloon. Get a little more paint off of that. All right, and now here we can speed up the drying process now again with the paint heat gun. Okay, so here, let's see. It's good and dry. I'm going to hit it again with the heat gun, but you can see how where I applied the rubber cement, it totally resisted the color, and you can see the yellow peeking through. You could see it as I was painting, but it's even more obvious when I dry it. And let me just hit this again with the heat gun just a little bit more. Okay, so now you could, you could call this finished and take off the rubber cement, but I want a second layer. So I want 2 different swirls of color. So I'm going to apply rubber cement again, just right over here, crisscrossing and adding in some more designs. And I try to hit places maybe where I didn't have much. And if you kind of take off the glue and then let it run down again, it might, it requires a little bit of patience and some kind of hope that it's just going to work out. And I'll show you some samples where sometimes it's not perfect, and so you can cut apart and use pieces of it. Let me get a little bit more down here and over here. And now we need to let this dry again, and I will be back. All right, so it has dried once more, and now we give it a final wash of color. So again, I like to get my paper wet so that the color flows. And I'm going to stick with pink this time, although I think that orange would be nice. I think that the pink and the yellow created kind of like an orangey pink underneath the second application of rubber cement. So I'm going to go with a deeper pink here. Whoops. And just, get as much color on there as you want. This will be your final color, and you can see that other lighter shade coming through underneath the lines as we give that final color. it's not going to be, for the colors I chose, it's not going to be as intense, but I have some other samples to show you where at least one other sample to show you where it is a lot more intense. So I'm going to leave it like that. Let's put the color out of the way, and then I will hit this with a heat gun. Whoops. Alright, so that's pretty dry. I try to heat it from both sides to kind of prevent a little bit of the curling, but if you're going to die cut it, it's going to flatten out a little bit, and there are other ways to flatten and bend it, especially if you've used a nice thick watercolor paper. And if you've used a thin one, just use a lot of adhesive on the back and that'll hold it down after you do some little flattening with it. Alright, so now's the fun part. We take off all of the rubber cement. You can use your finger and just start working it away. I happen to have a little adhesive remover that I've had forever. I have no idea where it came from. I'm sure Michael's or somewhere like that, but I literally have had it for probably 20 plus years. And or maybe even more. And so as you take it off, you see these other two lines of color really showing themselves, and it's nice and crisp and bright. The rubber cement does a good job of sealing it, and here's where I had that little, where I thought that maybe some of that bubble popped, and that's okay, it's just a little bit of color there. And we just keep taking it off until it's all done. And there we go. And just kind of rub your finger over it to make sure you've got it all off. And you have a really pretty swirly panel of custom paper to either die cut and create a shape with, or to use as a layer. I will assemble the balloon card in just a second. I actually saved pieces. I have pieces already cut and ready to go, but at this point, for the balloon card, I did a wash of shimmer. I'm not sure what I want to do with this piece yet, so I'm going to hold off on putting the shimmer, but this is just watercolor shimmer. I just, wet my paper and just spread a little bit of the shimmer color over it, and it gave it a nice shiny sheen to it. I think it would also be really pretty if you were die cutting something and covering it adhesive and glitter, and these colors would pop through as well. There's so many neat things that I want to try after doing this. So let me set this one aside. Let's move my water out of the way, clean off my mat, and let's get all of the card pieces I have for the card I decided to make. When I was playing around with the little pieces, I thought it looked like a balloon. I think I said that a little while ago. And so I wanted a balloon floating up, and so I decided to go with a long legal size vertical card. It measures 4 by 9 1/4, and it fits into a legal envelope. Here's the balloon I did earlier, and see how you can see that shine and shimmer that I added as the finishing touch. It just made me think balloons. I save all my insides when I do shaker cards, and I had a balloon, which is perfect for the back of my balloon. So let me just go ahead and apply that right now to get started. I also die cut the two hands and stamped, and die cut and stamped 2 sleeves from Give Me a Hand, and the sentiment, Hip Hip Hooray, It's Your Day. I contemplated putting Happy Birthday on the balloon, but then my daughter was like, no, please don't mess it up. I love it that way. So we're going to leave it that way. Next thing we need to do is tie a little string. Again, this is something I have in my stash that I've had forever. It's a waxed string. You could use twine, you could stamp your string, you could draw your string. I just love this because I can get swirlies with it without any glue. So let me just tie that up, show you the placement, and then I'll make the card. Also with this, you could leave it with just a single tie, but I want it to face the other direction, so I'm going to do a double tie, a knot. But this waxy string sticks to itself and to the paper. So let's just place that where I want to place it. I'm going to have the string coming down and captured by this hand here. So I'm just going to cut it off a little bit extra so that I have enough. And let's assemble all of our pieces. The hands are going to come off the edge like they're reaching up from down below, and the sleeves are going to go on the hands, and then the sentiment here. So let me get that all together, and I'll be right back. All right, and there you have it. Two hands reaching up to see the balloon. Actually, I just see a little mistake I want to fix. I really like the whole stamped edge to come off the edge so that you can sense that it's going deeper below the page and not just a hand out of nowhere. And so this one wasn't quite there. Let me do that again. All right, there it is. Hip hip hooray, it's your day with our beautiful swirly balloon, hands reaching up to catch it, and a sweet sentiment, and then you could put happy birthday on the inside. Now, to show you a few of the other things that I created, in playing with this particular design, I really have lots of variations. Here's one that came out a little more orangey, and I used a heavier hand with the yellow to begin with, and so then you could barely see the pink coming in, but it's still going to look good for a card. I just need to think of what to do with it. Here's another one where I was really heavy-handed with all of the colors, definitely deeper, maybe less water, more yellow, and then when I added the pink the first time, I got a good healthy orange, but then the pink at the end came out more red and much deeper color. I think I definitely used a lot less water on this one, and then I did not put the shimmer on this one. Here's one that I tried. I did pink and orange mixed as a base color and just kind of let it spread. I wet the whole paper, I let it spread. Then I did my first layer of rubber cement, painted, I believe, more pink to kind of cover over and blend the two colors more, and then I did another layer. So that one's definitely different with more pops of bright yellow. And here's the one today. And then here's one where I actually used the brush and did some brushing on instead of drizzling. And you get that little brush texture, and that's really cool. This one also took a lot less time to dry because of that, because the rubber cement was thinner. You could paint on with a smaller paintbrush. You can do more deliberate designs if you wanted to. Just to show you a couple of the other cards that I created for today. This one was one of my first tries, and I really had a light touch with the drizzling. I was rubbing off the rubber cement in between each painting, and so there was more mixing and more crisscross. I really like waiting to take off all the rubber cement at the end, because then I would have had more yellow that way if I'd done that. But this one was yellow, blue, and then green to kind of blend it all together. Made a great background for the butterfly though. And then I tried one here. It's hard to tell because I punched it, where I tried to do blue stripes going one way and purple stripes going this way. And then I wanted to test out what would happen if I smushed some of the rubber cement off, and it didn't work very well. But I didn't throw away the piece because I had several good sections of the little card that I could use. And it randomly ended up that I had this blue line on each one where the good parts were that was not connected necessarily on the little swatch sample, because I had several blue lines running through, and I thought I cut some circles out where the little sample piece was still usable, and it made a good little backdrop to celebrate. I have a business card on my bulletin board that has this similar layout, and so I'm like, oh, that might be fun, and my daughters really both like this one. But I loved the color scheme of the lighter 2 shades of purple and the blue, and so I had to do a swirly one. This one I did a little bit more deliberate so that I could stamp the hands at the bottom and make it look like these were streamers in and above the hands. I also made sure that I was heavier handed with the paint from the top going down so that it would be lighter as I went. So I started off with darker shades of blue and made sure that I blended the ink lighter towards the bottom with my water. Then I did the rubber cement over the blue. Then I did a lighter purple, and again I started darker at the top with it and then let it get lighter towards the bottom, and then I've drizzled more rubber cement, and then I did the whole thing in a much darker purple, and again heavier with the paint, and let it blend down lighter with water towards the bottom. And this one is probably one of my favorite cards. Probably these two are my two favorites, but they took the more work for me to kind of fine tune it and get it right. And again, for this one, I had some miscellaneous pieces of that double-sided foam tape from inside different window cards, shaker cards, and I used it behind this, and that really does keep your paper nice and stable, and it won't warp anymore, and it's just really stuck on there nicely. So there you have it. There are all the different cards that I created and the different swatches of paper. It's a really fun technique. I don't think that you're limited to watercolor. If you don't have watercolors, you could use watered down ink on watercolor paper, or and have the same effect. You could even, if you have a brayer, you could roll ink on over the rubber cement, and it would work just the same on regular paper rather than rather than watercolor paper. You could probably even sponge your ink right over it, as long as you don't have too heavy of a hand and start rubbing the rubber cement off. It would work that way too. So lots of fun ideas. You can just be freeform with your drizzling. You could be a little bit more deliberate and still drizzle, or you could brush it on with the brush in the glue, or with a smaller paintbrush. As always, you can find more information on how to play along and link up at Nicole Hetty's blog. This has been Lexi Daly for Paper Tray Ink. Thanks for watching. Bye.